The empty chair. Julian consulted his watch, the Patek Philippe's face gleaming softly in the dim glow. 8 minutes passed. She was beyond tardy. This felt deliberate, a calculated disregard. He tasted the Chateau Margaux, its intricate bouquet failing to dissipate the prickle of annoyance. Nearby, the maitre d', his name already lost in the haze of a perfunctory greeting, lingered with the attentiveness of a carrion bird, poised to offer a superfluous bread roll or extol the virtues of tonight's special. A curt smile was all he offered. Everything is exquisite, thank you. Exquisite was a facade, of course. The cuisine was flawless, the setting meticulously curated, the wine and nectar of the gods, yet the evening rang false, incomplete, like a concerto missing its key instrument. The unoccupied seat across from him was a stark, silent accusation. He adjusted himself, the supple leather offering scant comfort against the disquiet tightening his gut. What would people think? He'd made such fanfare about securing this prime spot at Le Fleur, a place where mere acquaintance with the owner was social currency. He had practically announced his plans to half the board at Vance Industries, conjuring visions of refined revelry. Now, he was merely a solitary figure, a portrait of pitiable isolation. His gaze swept the room. A practiced, winning smile affixed in case of recognition. He spied familiar figures amidst the gentry. Charles Abernathy, the shipping baron, accompanied by a woman young enough to be a direct descendant, Beatrice Sterling, the art doyenne. Encircled by her customary entourage, relief washed over him as he realized no one from Vance Industries was yet present. Julian loathed this sensation, this vulnerability to scrutiny, this perception of inadequacy. He'd labored diligently to cultivate this persona, this aura of affluence and effortless charm. He'd meticulously chosen his clothes, his companions, even his pastimes, all to project an unshakable self-assurance and impeccable refinement. He was Julian Vance, the man who possessed it all. Or, at least, the man who projected that image. The truth, a truth he desperately tried to conceal beneath bespoke tailoring and carefully worded assertions, was that he was gripped by fear. Fear of failure, fear of being unmasked, fear of being perceived as anything less than flawless, and, perhaps most poignantly, fear of being alone. He swirled the wine, its crimson depths reflecting the candlelight. He recalled his father's words, uttered years ago during a particularly contentious board meeting. Perception defines reality, Julian. Never forget that. Substance matters less than appearances. He had embraced those words wholeheartedly, perhaps excessively so. His entire edifice was erected on the shaky ground of appearances, on the fickle whims of public opinion, and now, marooned in this ludicrously expensive establishment, he felt those foundations begin to erode. His eyes darted back to the empty chair. Where was she? Had something occurred? A fleeting stab of guilt was immediately eclipsed by a swell of resentment. She knew the gravity of this dinner, the stakes involved. Or perhaps she didn't. Perhaps she simply didn't care a whit. He signaled for another glass of wine. He needed to blunt the edge, to subdue the creeping anxiety threatening to overwhelm him. He needed to seize control of the narrative once more, to salvage the evening, to somehow transmute this debacle into a triumph. He envisioned the murmurs that would permeate the social circuit tomorrow. Did you catch Julian Vance at Le Fleur last night, dining solo? Quite a pathetic sight, really. He gritted his teeth. He wouldn't allow it. He wouldn't afford them that satisfaction. He resolved then and there. He would conclude his meal, politely decline dessert, and offer his apologies to the maitre d'. He would then repair to Le Baron, a discreet haunt of his, and immerse himself in the company of those who admired him, who reaffirmed his self-worth. He would rewrite the account, spin the tale to his advantage. He would ensure that everyone understood that Julian Vance was not an object of pity but an object of envy. Yet, even as he reached this conclusion, a quiet voice resonated within him. A voice eerily reminiscent of his own, stripped of affectation and ambition. A voice that posed a simple, chilling query. What if this is the real you? What if this is all there is? Just a man alone, sheltering behind a veneer of success, desperately attempting to fill the chasm in his soul with pricey wine and transient adulation. He emptied his glass, the sharp taste lingering. He lacked an answer, not yet. But he knew, with a disturbing certainty, that he must find one. And soon, the vacant chair served as a persistent, silent emblem of the void within. A meeting of minds. The lonely clink of silverware echoed across the deserted dining room. Julian Vance listlessly nudged the remains of his osso buco, the saffron risotto solidifying into a cheerless yellow mass. He checked his watch again. The gesture a nervous tick. Weeks ago, he'd secured the reservation, picturing a grand entrance, a spectacle of success. Now, The sole observers were the weary eyes of a busboy clearing dishes nearby. His phone vibrated. A brief text. Asterisk traffic jam, ETA soon. Hold off on ordering. Asterisk. He exhaled heavily, raking a hand through his meticulously styled hair, truthfully. His appetite had vanished hours ago, and a tight band of anxiety constricted his chest, despite the celebratory occasion, a promotion secured. A corner office with sweeping vistas awaited, yet, instead of triumph, that familiar, insidious worry crept in that he felt like a charlatan, miscast in a role he hadn't earned. His thoughts, unwelcome, spiraled back to a different era. A discarded version of himself. The grand ballroom, glittered with brittle smiles and the faint odor of desperation, fresh out of business school. Julian felt utterly out of place in his rented tuxedo. He'd only attended the charity gala under duress, his boss insisting on networking. Hovering near the champagne fountain, he nursed a drink he didn't want when he noticed her. Clara Moreau was unlike the others, those women draped in designer fabrics and rehearsed charm. She stood near a display of auction paintings, her expression thoughtful, dressed in an elegant, dusky blue gown. She emanated quiet intelligence. He hesitated, a practiced introduction faltering on his tongue. Instead, he blurted, "Do you think they genuinely care about the children this is supposed to help? Or is it just another publicity stunt?" She turned, her mahogany eyes widening slightly. A subtle smile touched her lips. A rather skeptical viewpoint for such a dazzling event. Wouldn't you agree? He shrugged, instantly regretting his bluntness. Perhaps. But I struggle to believe that all this spectacle isn't a distraction from the real issues. Maybe, she conceded. But even small acts of kindness, amplified, can have significance. It's about intention, not just results. She gestured toward a painting, a bright depiction of children at play. That artist donates this piece because he's been volunteering at the orphanage every Saturday for years. This auction is merely an extension of his dedication. That evening, they talked for hours, oblivious to the surrounding glitterati. They discussed education, social justice, the burden of privilege. He was captivated by her fervor, her unwavering faith in humanity. A stark contrast to the predatory world he inhabited. She, in turn, seemed drawn to his keen mind and the vulnerability he typically kept under lock and key. Their first date unfolded at a quaint bookstore, followed by coffee and a comfortable quiet, broken only by the turning of pages and the occasional perceptive observation. Long walks followed, punctuated by debates about obscure movies and late-night musings beneath the stars. That he learned about her work at a nonprofit, her passion for aiding underserved communities. She saw beyond his carefully constructed persona. Recognizing the insecure man lurking underneath, he unveiled the genuine article, the persona he typically suppressed. The one who cared, who yearned, who craved something deeper than power and wealth. A rapid sequence of images flashed through his mind. Clara's laughter as his cooking efforts triggered the smoke alarm. Their joined hands marching in solidarity against environmental degradation. The profound peace of reading alongside each other on a drizzly Sunday. Then, their wedding. A small, intimate affair in a wildflower garden. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine. Clara, radiant in her simple white gown, her eyes brimming with happiness as she walked towards him. A wave of emotion almost buckled his knees. He wasn't the man he pretended to be, the man he thought he needed to be. He was simply Julian, a man deeply in love with an exceptional woman. He recalled their vows, the promises of support, challenge, and unconditional love. He recalled her hand squeezing his, her touch a grounding force, a reassurance. For that brief, perfect moment, surrounded by loved ones, he truly believed he could become a better man, worthy of her affection, worthy of the life they were building together. The restaurant door jingled, severing the reverie. He straightened, plastering a smile onto his face. He had a facade to maintain, a life to uphold. "Julian, darling, I am so sorry to be late." He turned to greet his dining companion, a practiced composure masking his true feelings. "No problem, darling. I just ordered us some champagne." The shifting landscape, Julian's drumming on the immaculate tablecloth echoed the insistent beat of anticipation and dread in his chest. Le Fleur, with its crystal chandeliers and hushed reverence, was an edifice to aspiration, a place where ambition dined alongside affluence. Today, he'd officially become Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, a title that felt weighty, burnished, promising. Yet, unease gnawed at him. His Rolex, a recent necessity, reflected the time. Clara was a quarter of an hour behind schedule. Once, her casual disregard for punctuality had charmed him, a testament to her free-spirited nature. Now, it felt like an impediment. He pictured her still at the gallery, absorbed by some obscure canvas that spoke only to her sensibilities. He thought back to their initial encounter at a benefit gala. She'd been a vibrant anomaly amidst a sea of dark suits and stilted conversation, her uninhibited laughter, the genuine curiosity in her gaze as she listened to him ramble about profit margins had captivated him. He'd fallen hard. Now he expelled a quiet breath, lost in the ambient murmur of the restaurant. Now he questioned whether that vibrancy had dimmed, whether her unconventional nature had become impractical. He scanned the room, observing the polished women in their couture dresses and sculpted hairstyles. They possessed an effortless grace, an intrinsic sense of belonging. He'd tried, hadn't he, to mold her? He'd subtly suggested alternative stylists, floated the idea of a personal trainer, even gently nudged her toward more conventional fashion choices. He winced, recalling the previous week, before the Henderson soiree. She'd emerged from their dressing room in a flowing dress, embroidered with an explosion of color. "Do you think it's a tad much?" he'd inquired, striving for neutrality. Her smile wavered. "Much what? Much me." He'd hated the hurt he'd inflicted, genuinely, but that dress, it wouldn't fly. Not when he was vying for approval, not when he was being scrutinized by arbiters of success who judged worth by the tailoring of a suit and the luster of leather. The maitre d' materialized, a practiced smile gracing his features. "Mr. Vance, your wife has arrived." Clara rushed toward him, her cheeks flushed to becoming rose, her auburn hair slightly askew. She wore a simple black dress, but it was the wrong shade, a muted black that lacked the richness of her surroundings. He rose and brushed a kiss against her cheek. A perfunctory gesture. "I'm terribly sorry," she apologized, breathless. The gallery had an unexpected crisis. A shipment of sculptures suffered damage. He dismissed it with a wave. "Don't give it another thought." But he did. He bristled at the way her profession, her zeal, consistently took precedence. He felt the pointed glances of other executives, the silent inquiries in their regard. Throughout the meal, he found himself making subtle course corrections. Minute adjustments. He rectified her pronunciation of a French vintage, deftly redirected the discussion from the art world to his promotion, delicately removed her hand from her face when she began to fidget. Clara perceived it all. He registered it in the absence of genuine warmth in her smile, in the rigid grip on her wine stem. He noted how she began to mirror his posture, as if attempting to assimilate, to transform into someone he deemed acceptable. He caught her studying him. A fleeting expression he couldn't quite categorize shimmering in her eyes. Regret? Resignation? He averted his gaze, concentrating on the exquisite crust of his steak. He rationalized that he was doing this for their mutual benefit. For their future. He was building an empire, and she needed to comprehend the stakes. As they departed the restaurant, he signaled for a taxi. The quiet within the cab felt oppressive, laden with unspoken resentments. He reached for her hand, but she recoiled. Almost imperceptibly. He stared out the window, watching the urban tableau streak by. The shifting panorama outside mirrored the evolving landscape within him, a growing chasm between the man he was and the man he was evolving into. A man who was beginning to perceive his wife not as a partner but as a liability, the new help. Julian checked his watch for the fifth time in as many minutes, the muted gold glinting under the restaurant's soft lighting. A promotion to senior VP should have calmed his nerves, solidified his standing. Instead, he felt a gnawing anxiety. A familiar companion these last few months. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the ice clinking a lonely tune. He remembered Clara, radiant in emerald green at the charity gala where they'd met. Her laugh, bright and uninhibited, had cut through the polite murmur like a shard of glass. Now her laughter was rare, almost a forgotten melody. He placed the advertisement discreetly, emphasizing the need for someone organized, efficient, and possessing a high degree of professionalism. Elena had been the first to respond, arriving precisely on time, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her tailored suit impeccably pressed. Her nails subtly manicured, her posture ramrod straight. She was polished. A stark contrast to Clara's increasingly bohemian style, her penchant for flowing fabrics and loose, unbound hair. "Mr. Vance," Elena had said, her voice a smooth alto, "thank you for seeing me." He'd spent an hour grilling her, impressed by her quick answers and her evident understanding of household management. She'd worked for a prominent family on the Upper East Side for 5 years, overseeing everything from grocery shopping to scheduling repairs. He hadn't even bothered interviewing anyone else. The restaurant door chimed and his heart lurched. Clara. She was late, again. He braced himself, pushing down the surge of irritation that threatened to surface. Elena had been a revelation. The house ran with a newfound precision. Bills were paid on time, groceries appeared as if by magic, and even the perpetually dusty bookshelves seemed to gleam. He found himself seeking her out, ostensibly to discuss household matters, but secretly to bask in her efficiency and the way she anticipated his needs. "The dry cleaning is back, Mr. Vance," she'd say, laying his freshly pressed shirts on his bed. Or, "I've scheduled the plumber to fix the leaky faucet. Vance. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" He'd found himself lingering in the kitchen, watching her prepare dinner, her movements economical and graceful. She never intruded, never overstepped, but her presence was comforting. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to drift through the house like a ghost. She'd spend hours in her studio, lost in her art, emerging only for meals, her eyes glazed over with creative energy. He'd try to engage her in conversation to bridge the widening gap between them, but she'd often respond with a distracted smile and a vague, "That's nice, Julian." He stood as Clara approached the table, her scarf trailing behind her like a forgotten promise. Her face, usually so expressive, was etched with a weary resignation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The gallery, it ran late." He nodded, pushing down the familiar disappointment. "It's all right." But it wasn't. It hadn't been all right for a long time. During dinner, he found himself talking about his promotion, about the challenges and the opportunities that lay ahead. Clara listened patiently, offering the occasional nod or a murmured word of encouragement, but her eyes held a distant sadness, a knowing that he couldn't quite decipher. He caught Elena's eye as she cleared the table the next morning. She was standing by the window, sunlight illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He'd asked her to rearrange the living room furniture, a task Clara had been putting off for weeks. "You have a good eye, Elena," he said, surprised by the warmth in his own voice. "The room looks brighter." Elena smiled, a fleeting, almost shy expression. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. I'm glad I could be of assistance." He noticed Clara watching them from the doorway, her expression unreadable. She stood there for a moment, her arms crossed, before turning and disappearing down the hallway. He felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting sense of unease, but it quickly dissipated, replaced by the familiar comfort of Elena's presence, the quiet efficiency that had become so essential to his daily life. He wondered if Clara even noticed the difference, if she even cared. Confidences. Julian rotated his glass, the solitary ice cubes tinkling a fragile melody in the nearly deserted dining room. Landing the Delacroix account should have warranted a celebratory toast, not this vice of unease constricting his heart. Clara was tardy. As usual. He checked his watch, the gleaming surface a tiny mirror to the subdued glow emanating from the wall lamps. 20 minutes. 20 minutes spent meticulously dissecting the negotiation, each phrase, each gesture scrutinized for imperfections in his triumph. He recalled the gala where he'd first encountered Clara, the sudden dazzle of her smile beneath the opulent chandeliers, her delighted response to his wry humor. Now, her laughter seemed forced, her smile a mere facade. The dazzling chandeliers were a distant memory, replaced by the unflattering glare of the kitchen's overhead lights, revealing a landscape of scattered crumbs and an overflowing laundry hamper. Elena's arrival was like a sudden breeze in the stifling air of his disquiet. Her dress, a shade of deepest azure, traced the line of her figure with understated elegance. She possessed a quiet self-assurance that Clara seemed to have mislaid somewhere amidst diapers and domesticity. "Julian, I am so sorry. The traffic was a monster." She slipped into the booth, her hand grazing his forearm. "You seem distracted. Is everything all right?" He exhaled dramatically, a calculated performance designed to elicit her sympathy. The Delacroix deal finally closed, but it was a grueling battle. They haggled over every penny. I practically had to threaten to pull out. Elena's eyes widened, reflecting a blend of concern and admiration. "You did, Julian? That's remarkable. To have such fortitude." She leaned in, her voice a soft murmur. "I can't imagine that level of pressure. You manage it so gracefully." He luxuriated in her praise, the warmth spreading through him like a shot of aged scotch. "It exacts a toll that I sometimes feel as though I'm bearing the entire company's burdens." He paused, allowing a hint of vulnerability to color his voice. And sometimes, I wonder if it's all worth the sacrifice. Elena's expression softened. Of course it is, Julian, you're building something extraordinary. You're brilliant, and you deserve all the rewards you've earned. She reached across the table, her fingertips briefly touching his. Don't let the stress consume you, you're excelling. He clasped her hand, retaining it a beat longer than protocol dictated. Thank you, Elena. You always know precisely what to say. He then launched into an elaborate retelling of the Delacroix negotiations, casting himself as a sagacious negotiator, a tireless worker, a visionary strategist. He detailed every hurdle, every setback, every fleeting moment of doubt, each carefully chosen to underscore his intelligence and perseverance. He barely registered Elena's minimal contributions. The occasional murmur of assent, the supportive nod, the concerned crease of her brow, her mere presence was enough. Her unspoken admiration a soothing balm to his wounded pride. He was midway through a sentence, expounding on the nuances of a particularly intricate contractual provision, when a shadow eclipsed the table. Clara stood there, her face a rigid mask of suppressed annoyance. Sorry I'm late, she said, her tone curt. Traffic, apparently, everyone decided to descend on the restaurants tonight. She slid into the booth opposite Elena, her movements abrupt. She was wearing the dress he detested, the one that aged her and conveyed an air of weariness. Julian swiftly withdrew his hand from Elena's, a brief flash of guilt and irritation surfacing within him. Clara, you made it. Obviously, she replied, her gaze flickering between Julian and Elena. What were you two discussing? Julian cleared his throat. Just work. I was filling Elena in on the Delacroix deal. Clara's gaze lingered on Elena, appraising. Oh, really? How fascinating. Her voice was toneless, completely devoid of warmth. Elena, sensing the sudden chill in the air, offered a polite, if brittle, smile. Julian was just explaining the finer points of the contract. It sounds incredibly demanding. Clara's smile remained confined to her lips, never reaching her eyes. Julian always immerses himself in his work. It's commendable. She understood perfectly that Julian wasn't simply elucidating the contract's details. She detected the undercurrent of complaint, the craving for validation, the shared intimacy of a discourse from which she was excluded. She had stumbled upon a confidence rightfully belonging to her, not his assistant. The knot in Julian's chest intensified. Dinner had abruptly transformed into a precarious battlefield. The award ceremony. Julian drummed his fingers on the starched white tablecloth, the silverware rattling softly. The restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy, clinking glasses and murmured conversations, a stark contrast to the gnawing anxiety in his gut. He'd secured the promotion, the culmination of years of relentless ambition. Yet the celebratory dinner tasted like ashes. He glanced at his watch again. Clara was late. He remembered the charity gala where they'd met. Clara radiant in a simple blue dress, her laughter echoing through the grand ballroom. He'd been captivated then by her genuine warmth, so different from the calculated charm of the women he usually encountered in his social circles now. He saw only the faded dress, the lines around her eyes, the way she always seemed a step behind in understanding the nuances of his world. The maitre d' approached, his smile practiced. Mr. Vance? Your wife is on her way, I presume. Yes, any minute now, Julian said, forcing a smile. She had a pressing engagement. He avoided the man's scrutinizing gaze, focusing instead on the glittering cityscape visible through the panoramic window. The award ceremony loomed large in his mind, a black tie affair where appearances were paramount. He couldn't afford to have Clara by his side, not with the vultures circling, ready to pounce on any perceived weakness. Clara finally arrived, breathless and apologetic. Julian, I'm so sorry, the meeting ran late, traffic was a nightmare. She smoothed down her hair, a strand escaping and clinging to her cheek. He stood and kissed her perfunctorily. Don't worry about it. I just ordered us some wine. He flagged down the waiter, consciously keeping his tone light, avoiding any mention of the ceremony. He knew if he brought it up, she would start planning, excitedly discussing dresses and hairstyles. He couldn't bear to disappoint her, not yet. The next morning, a Saturday, Julian found Elena dusting his study. Elena, he said, his voice carefully casual, I need your help. Elena, always discreet and efficient, paused, her dark eyes questioning. Of course, Mr. Vance. I have this event coming up, he began, deliberately vague. A formal affair, and I'm having trouble deciding what to wear. I need a woman's perspective, someone with a good eye. Elena hesitated, her gaze sweeping over his tailored suits hanging in the closet. I'm not sure I'm the right person, Mr. Vance. Perhaps Mrs. Vance could assist you better. He waved his hand dismissively. Clara is preoccupied. Besides, he added, lowering his voice, I value your opinion. You have a certain elegance. He watched her closely, gauging her reaction. A faint blush rose on her cheeks. For the next hour, he paraded outfits before her, seeking her judgment on fabrics, cuts, and colors. It was a charade, of course. He knew exactly what he would wear. But it served his purpose, allowing him to observe Elena, to assess her poise and her quiet confidence. He imagined her in an elegant gown, her dark hair swept up, her eyes sparkling. The image solidified his decision. Sunday evening. He sat Clara down in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for the lie he was about to tell. Clara, he began, his voice low and sympathetic, I have some bad news about the ceremony. Her eyes widened, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. What is it? Is everything all right? There's been a last-minute change. A crucial meeting has been scheduled for that evening. A major deal is on the line. Clara. My presence is absolutely essential. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. I'm so sorry. I know how much you were looking forward to it. Clara stared at him, her face pale. But the award. I thought. I know, darling, I know, he said, reaching for her hand. It's just terrible timing, but this deal could change everything for us, Clara. It's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. He watched the disappointment wash over her face, the light dimming in her eyes. A pang of guilt twisted in his stomach, quickly overshadowed by a surge of relief. He'd done it. He had secured his future, at least for now. He would take Elena. And no one would suspect a thing. A colleague. Julian glanced at his watch, the sleek metal glinting under the muted restaurant lighting. 7 to 18. Elena was behind schedule, a minor infraction, but enough to cause a subtle tightening in his chest. He sipped the sparkling water, the effervescence doing little to quell the unease churning within him. Barely a day ago, he'd been riding high on the exhilaration of his advancement. Now, doubt gnawed at him, an unwelcome yet familiar sensation. He conjured an image of Clara, her brow creased in concentration as she meticulously decorated a cake, the sweet perfume of vanilla clinging to her. Clara wouldn't have grasped the significance of the evening, the quiet calculations that had gone into selecting his tie, his conversation topics. Clara wouldn't have wanted the scene. The entrance chime heralded Elena's arrival, a flurry of auburn hair and self-assured charm. She wore the emerald dress he had subtly steered her toward, the color deepening the green of her eyes. He rose, a practiced smile in place. Elena, you look incredible. Problems with traffic? A nightmare, she conceded, her smile radiant. But I wouldn't have missed this. The ceremony unfolded in the opulent ballroom of the city's landmark hotel, a space shimmering with chandeliers and hushed anticipation. A surge of elation coursed through Julian as he guided Elena through the throng of colleagues and associates. He introduced her with a flourish, my invaluable colleague, Elena Ramirez. She's been a driving force behind the Northwood project. He observed, pleased, as faces brightened with curiosity. Nods of acknowledgement, murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. He reveled in the reflected attention, the validation he craved. Elena, composed and eloquent, addressed inquiries about the project with grace, her genuine passion contagious. He caught Mr. Abernathy, the CEO, offering a clipped nod and a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile. A win. Later. Amidst the buffet table groaning with miniature delicacies, a voice intruded upon the polite murmur. Julian, is that you? He turned to face Robert Finch, a former associate from his days at the smaller firm. Surprise flickered across Robert's features. Haven't seen you in ages. Congratulations on the promotion. Where's Clara? Always had a soft spot for her. Julian's smile wavered. He hadn't prepared for this curveball. Clara couldn't make it, family obligations. He sensed Elena's scrutiny, sharp and perceptive. Robert, unaware of the subtle shift in atmosphere, pressed on. Oh, that's a shame. She always seemed so genuine. A healthy counterbalance to your ambition, if I may say so. He chuckled, then moved on, leaving Julian feeling strangely exposed and vulnerable. The remainder of the evening dissolved into a series of carefully orchestrated exchanges and strained smiles, but Robert's comment lingered, a sour note in the otherwise harmonious melody of his triumph. He caught Elena watching him, her expression in enigma. As they exited the hotel, the crisp night air offering a welcome reprieve, Elena shattered the silence. You omitted mentioning Clara when you introduced me to Robert. Julian scrambled for an explanation. It just didn't seem pertinent. This was a professional setting. But he inquired about her. Elena persisted, her voice low but firm. And you appeared uneasy. He sighed, raking his fingers through his hair. It's complicated, Elena. Clara. She wouldn't quite fit in this setting. She wouldn't have enjoyed it. I wanted you to experience this, to see what I'm striving for. But why present me as a colleague? She questioned, halting on the sidewalk. The streetlight cast elongated shadows, emphasizing the growing chasm between them. Why not simply introduce me as a friend? He opened his mouth to answer, but the words caught in his throat. He understood the reason. Friend lacked the desired impact, the implicit possibility. Friend didn't elevate his carefully cultivated persona in the same way. Elena's eyes narrowed, her gaze intense. You brought me here to impress, didn't you? You needed someone who looked the part, someone who aligned with your narrative. He offered no denial. He couldn't. A flash of disappointment flickered across her face, swiftly masked by a resolute glint. I think I understand now, Julian. Thank you for the clarification. She hailed a taxi, leaving him marooned on the sidewalk, the radiant facade of the hotel mocking his hollow victory. The promotion felt less like an achievement and more like an ornamental trap, and as he watched the taxi recede into the night, he realized he had some serious soul-searching to undertake, not with Elena but with himself, the unveiling. Julian Vance tugged at his tie, the expensive silk suddenly a suffocating band around his throat. The Zenith Hotel's grand ballroom vibrated with anticipation. He was about to be celebrated. The youngest VP Omnicorp had ever seen. A career-defining moment, years in the making, yet Clara occupied his every thought. He recalled their first meeting at a charity gala, the vapid chatter. The way her cognac-colored eyes had sparkled when he delivered a particularly awful pun. He'd been utterly smitten. Then came marriage. 2 years had dissolved into a blend of strategy sessions and brittle smiles at social gatherings. He'd imagined sharing this victory with her, basking in the shared glow, but Clara. She'd become a stranger. The vivacity had faded, replaced by a quiet disapproval he couldn't or wouldn't decipher. Another glance at his watch. The ceremony was imminent. Where was she? The car had been dispatched an hour ago. A cold dread twisted in his gut. He couldn't bear facing the Omnicorp brass, the local dignitaries, that judging gallery, alone, not tonight. Then he registered her presence. Or rather, them. Clara stood frozen inside the ballroom entrance, her face a study in disbelief. Her hand pressed against her chest as if fending off a blow. Next to him, Elena, his indispensable executive assistant, in a striking black dress amidst the pastel sea, gently touched his arm. Elena, privy to every nuance of his professional life, anticipating his needs before he articulated them. Gazing at him with a profound knowing that set his teeth on edge, Clara advanced, a silent hunter closing in. The room's hum dwindled to a muted roar as she cut through the throng, her eyes laser-focused on Julian and Elena. He saw the sheen of impending tears. The iron set to her jaw. He recognized that expression, the deceptive calm before the tempest. Julian, she stated, her voice surprisingly measured, slicing through the polite drone like shattered crystal. Congratulations. It seems I'm a trifle late. He swallowed against a parched throat. Clara, what is this? You're disrupting everything. She brushed past him, her attention fixed on Elena. And you must be Elena. Julian mentions you often, your efficiency, your indispensability, almost a co-wife. A collective intake of breath rippled through the ballroom. Elena's hand recoiled as if burned. Fury surged through Julian. How dare she humiliate him like this, before everyone? Clara, this is neither the time nor the place. On the contrary, I believe it's the perfect time and place, she retorted, her voice gaining volume. Years I've invested, Julian. Years nurturing your ambitions, sacrificing my own. For what? So you could parade your paramour in front of my face? He wanted to deny it, to shout that she was being irrational, but the truth flickered in his gaze, trembled in his hands, betraying him. Elena stepped forward, her complexion pale but her spine straight. Clara, I'm deeply sorry. This was never my intention. She pivoted to Julian, her voice sharp with newfound resolve. You sicken me, Julian. You deceived me, you deceived your wife, and you deceived yourself. You manipulated us both. Facing the crowd, her voice rang with conviction. I have submitted my resignation, effective immediately. I will no longer be an accessory to this deception. A stunned quiet descended. All eyes followed Elena as she turned and walked away, dignity radiating from every step. The whispers ignited, starting softly, then escalating, swirling around Julian like a brewing squall. His triumph had curdled into a bitter taste in his mouth. Clara regarded him, her expression a complex blend of pity and disdain. I should have seen it, she murmured, her voice barely audible above the mounting din. I actually believed you were better than this, Julian. Then, with a finality that resonated deep within him, she turned and walked away, leaving him stranded amidst the ruins of his carefully constructed existence. The stage lights beat down on him, each one a harsh spotlight illuminating his shame. Empty rooms. Empty heart. The heavy front door yielded with a muted slam, the sound amplified in the echoing foyer. Julian Vance entered, the pervasive aroma of lemon cleaner, Clara's signature, offering scant comfort against the unease churning within him. An unnatural stillness blanketed the house, a silence far beyond mere quiet. It felt uninhabited. He dropped his briefcase onto the console, the resulting crash a sharp intrusion on the pervasive quiet. Normally, Clara would be in the kitchen, a melodic hum accompanying the comforting sense of rosemary and roasting chicken. Winston, their excitable terrier mix, would be underfoot, a whirlwind of canine enthusiasm. Tonight, the air hung heavy with absence. His voice, strained and thin, broke the silence. Clara, I'm back. Only the echo answered. On the kitchen island, a stark white rectangle stood out against the dark granite. He recognized the graceful loops of Clara's handwriting. Dread tightened his chest as he reached for the note. Julian, it began. By the time you find this, I'll be gone. I waited an hour at Le Fleur. You never arrived. I know about Sophie. I witnessed the charade, the champagne, the easy laughter, a chilling echo of our early years. Only with me erased from the picture. I can't endure this heartbreak any longer. I need space, a chance to recover. The future is a blur, but I know I can't remain here with you. Please respect my need for solitude, Clara. The words swam before his eyes, fueled by a sudden burning sting. Sophie, the housekeeper. Lost in the heady rush of the affair, the intoxicating validation of her attention, he had callously disregarded the woman who had shared her life with him. She deserved far more than his betrayal. He collapsed into a kitchen chair, the cold granite a stark contrast to the sudden heat of shame flooding him. His reflection, a stranger with haunted eyes, glared back from the darkened window. He had been on the cusp of everything he thought he desired, the vice presidency at Sterling Investments, the accolades, the influence. He had envisioned himself ascending to the apex, admired, coveted, but at what cost? If it meant forfeiting the one soul who truly mattered, the desolate atmosphere within the house mirrored the growing chasm in his soul. He'd bartered genuine connection for shallow thrills, substance for illusion. He'd pursued a fleeting image in a mirror instead of cherishing the authentic connection before him. Days blurred into weeks, each one an agonizing repetition. The phone remained stubbornly silent. His colleagues offered congratulations on his impending promotion, oblivious to the personal cataclysm that had rendered any professional victory hollow. The celebratory parties, the hollow cheers, the patronizing pats on the back. A grotesque charade in light of his ruin. His focus deteriorated, the burden of his actions a crushing weight. He shed pounds, his complexion taking on a sickly pallor. One morning, confronted by his disheveled appearance, he recognized the necessity of a drastic change. He needed guidance. He sought help from Dr. Anya Sharma, a therapist whose kind eyes mirrored the warmth of her voice. He recounted his insecurities, his boundless ambition, the unquenchable thirst for external approval. He spoke of Clara, of their initial meeting at a charity gala, of her unwavering commitment to serving others. He confessed to the affair with Sophie, the ephemeral distraction that had cost him everything he held dear. Dr. Sharma listened with unwavering patience, offering insights that bypassed his meticulously constructed defenses. You sought external validation to compensate for a void within yourself, Julian. It's crucial to examine the why behind your choices, not merely the what. He began volunteering at Hope's Embrace, the shelter for abused women and children Clara championed. The work was demanding, often heartbreaking. He cleaned tirelessly, sorted donations, and listened to stories of unspeakable hardship and remarkable tenacity. He observed Clara from a distance, a beacon of compassion amidst the turmoil. Her movements possessed a quiet grace, her very presence a source of solace to those who had lost everything. Her hair was simply styled, devoid of makeup, yet she emanated a radiance surpassing anything he'd ever witnessed, both in her and others. He watched her interact with the children, her smile genuine, her touch gentle. He witnessed the profound impact she had on their lives, the glimmer of hope she sparked in their eyes. He realized the vacuity of his own aspirations. He had been so consumed with scaling the corporate ladder that he had forgotten the essence of humanity. One evening, as the last golden light streamed through the shelter windows, he found her in the garden, tending a small rose bed. Approaching tentatively, his heart hammered against his ribs. Clara, he began, his voice barely audible. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise. He glimpsed a fleeting shadow of pain, instantly replaced by a polite mask. Julian, she acknowledged, her tone neutral. He inhaled deeply. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to say this. I am profoundly sorry for everything, for the pain I inflicted, for betraying your faith, for falling so short of the husband you deserved. I was utterly blind, Clara. Blind to your extraordinary worth, blind to the boundless love you offered. I was a complete fool. He paused, the words catching in his throat, thick with regret. Is forgiveness even possible?